Hello, everyone. Today is February 14th, 2025. Happy Valentine's Day. The topic of this discussion today, or video today, is stored procedures and also how they are used in a full stack application. So, last video talked about something called SQL injection, sort of a related topic. One of the strategies for avoiding SQL injection is stored procedures. I will leave a link to that video in the section below for you to look at. Okay, what are stored procedures? Stored procedures is a set of pre-written structured query language SQL statements saved within a database management system that can be executed as a single unit, allowing for reusable code to perform complex operations on data within the database, often with the ability to accept input parameters to custom the operation based on the data provided. So I'll go over to my stored right here, the one that we're using for user authentication. And we looked at this one in the SQL injection video, using it again to show you, and we're getting into some more stored procedures and how it's used in a full stack application. So moving ahead, review client server architecture. The front end is basically in three parts. There's the front end and the back end, but the back end has really two major components to it. The front end, client side, could be a web application, a web browser application, or some sort of smart phone device as well, or something else. On the back end, server side, you've got two components to that. One is the application server, which could be written in things like PHP, ASP.NET, Java, Node.js, Python, for example. The second component to it is the database. A number of options there as well. SQL Server, Oracle, MySQL, MongoDB, Postgres is not listed here, but that's another possibility. Very popular as well. Stored procedures are written on the database. And we'll see how it goes. We're going to look at a login form where you log in, where the login information is sent by the browser down to the application server. In this case, I'm using Node.js with Express for this example. Then the application server is going to communicate to the database using something called a data access object class, also written in Node.js. And then the stored procedure will process the user login, and whether it's authenticated or not, it will send a message back to the application server. That message is in turn sent back to the client. So the application server kind of works like a middleman here, right? So let's go to our login. Right here, we got a login here. So we've already got credentials typed in there. Here, that's correct. I'm going to type in the correct password. I think that's the correct password. Let me see. Login. Now I get a pop-up message there. You see it says user authenticated. So let's go back to the stored procedure. The stored procedure, if the user is authenticated, is sending back this message here as a select statement, which gets translated back in the application server in the format of JSON. If we look at our nice little application server here, we can see we get some messages here down in the console log that it got back from the database, user authenticated. Now, this message originates from the database. Go back to the browser, that's the exact message we got. I'm going to change this and make a quick change in the database and change this message here that says database says user authenticated. Changing into the database in the stored procedure on the database. Now I'm going to click login again. And now look, the message here has changed. Because that message, going back to our chart here, the database authenticated the user in the stored procedure. Sent a message back to the application server. The application server, in turn, sent the message back to the client. And then the browser is just popping up the message it got back from the database. Okay. And I'm just going to change this back. Now, the other thing, there's a couple of benefits to using stored procedures. One of the things is you'll see here, get rid of that. I'm doing an insert into something called a user log, right? In the user log. So I've got the user log up here, and if I execute it, okay, you see it's down there with today's date. And I'm just going to go ahead and truncate this table so we can see it again, truncate it. Okay, nothing's there now, empty. So I'll go ahead and click login again, user authenticated, come down to our user log. Now there's a row in there. Now, if I enter the incorrect password, let's enter an incorrect password there. Now it says user not authenticated. If I go back down to the database and click refresh on the log, I'll see here now, user not authenticated. So the stored procedure, in addition to doing the authentication, it's logging as well. That's great for auditing purposes, keeping track of who's trying to log in and not. Going back to our slide. So here's kind of code snippets. This right here is the code on the browser, the web browser. So in the web browser, you can do a right click, go down to view source code, and it's kind of, you see a lot of it. I can show it to you in VS Code as well, but we'll see that function right here, post login. This JavaScript is executing on the client, right? That's this guy right here, the front end client side. That's where that JavaScript executes. But all it's doing is it's grabbing the credentials that you entered on the form, creating an object, and then it's using the fetch command, JavaScript fetch command, to send that to the server. Got that same code right here in the login. Right here, it's the same code right there. A little easier to see. It makes a call to right here. I'm running it on my local computer. Making calls, passing the information back. And then remember, we got the pop-up. That's the alert in JavaScript. That pop-up is the message that the database sent back, right? Not the application server, but the database sent that message back. So that's the JavaScript. Now, after it does this fetch right there, the fetch command right there, that goes out to the server. Go to the server. The server is getting it in the router, auth. You see /auth. Going back to here, you see it's going API auth, right? Here it just says auth, and I'll show you why. We'll go to VS Code here. This is my API router. The API router has a default start root of API. That's why you don't have to include it down here. We scroll down here. Scroll down further. Where is it? Auth. Somewhere here. Here it is. Auth. That's the same code. So then what's auth doing? Auth is creating a user object based on just the username and the password. Got some console logs here. And then I'm calling, I have a service layer. Go here. Right? It's calling this service layer. Service.auth. The service layer gets the user, and what is it's doing? It's now passing that user on through to my data access object from MySQL. There's a separate data access object. Going back to the VS Code, if I look at service, where is it here? Auth. Somewhere up here. Auth, right here. That's the same code. Calls the MySQL database or the MySQL data object. And it's calling auth there as well. The next bit of code here, this is the chunk, this is in the DAO, the MySQL DAO. And what is it doing? It's calling the stored procedure USP auth and passing to it username and password. This now calls the stored procedure, which is right here. Here's the stored procedure we were just looking at. Stored procedure receives the username and password. It checks to see if that username and password are valid. If it is, it's putting an entry into the user log saying the user authenticated. What the username is, they authenticated, status code of 1, and the system date. And again, if we go back to our database, under user log, there it is. There's that row right there. Now, If it doesn't authenticate, I'm going to go back to here. If it doesn't authenticate, it's still putting an entry in the user log, but it's saying status -1, user not authenticated. And again, the system date time. And it's returning a message. This message here gets returned back to the server. Select one as status, user authenticated as message. I'm also passing back the user ID, the username, and the role ID. If we go down to the server here, so we don't see it here, let me go do an actual login, right? Do a correct login this time. Go to here. What you'll see is this says auth response. This is the response back from the database. Right? That's the response back from the database. And this matches exactly what we see in the stored procedure. Right? Matches exactly what we see in the stored procedure. Status 1, message, user authenticated. The user ID, which in this case is 2. The username, same one we put in, and what their role is. And it also generates a token. It's another thing it does, it generates a token, which can be used for further authentication within the API later on. Okay, so that's one example of using a stored procedure, and it shows you the entire workflow from the front end, whatever the client is, browser, iPhone, Android, whatever the client is, submitting a login, authenticating, first going to the application server essentially just passing on that information to the database, which does the authentication and responds back to the application server, whether the user authenticated or not. That message, in turn, is sent back to the web client. Now I'm going to show you a second one here, a web client for just a simple contact us page. And I'm also going to show you a little bit about data validation, which is also very important. We'll talk about that a bit. Here, contact us. Okay, so let's put something in here. Mickey Mouse, mickey.mouse@gmail.com. I love cheese. Okay, click send. And there we go. This says email sent successfully. This actually generates an email as well. Okay, so let's go back and let's look at our database. It says that we can see whether the email went or not. But let's look at the code here. Here's the stored procedure. USP contact save. Sent exactly the same way the user authentication was sent back, right? Through to the app server, through the route, to the service layer, to the DAO, it's exactly the same. Now this is putting a message in a regular log file. New contact message from email. So let's go to our database and let's look at the regular log file. New contact. Let me do a refresh. Peter Pan, why didn't we get that? It's interesting. Oops. Oh, I'm sorry. This version of the stored procedure here doesn't have the insert into the log file. The went into the, I'll add that. What happens to that? Well, here's the message put into the contact us table. So, interesting. Missed that. We can put an entry into our log file. We'll just go ahead and do it right here. So right here, put an entry in here, and we'll do another one. Okay, insert into logger, message, stamp, values. Now we have to use concatenate function to concatenate stuff because I'm saying concatenate new contact message from and then p underscore email and sysdate. Okay. I think that should be okay. And let's go ahead and apply that. Okay, so let's go and try that again. This time, let's say it's from Donald Duck. Donald Duck. And this will be Donald Duck. And this will be quack, quack. Sent. Okay, email again. Now let's go back to MySQL, and we're going to look at the logger file. There should be a logger entry in this time. Yay, new message right there from Donald Duck. If we look at the contacts table, we'll see, there it is, Donald Duck, quack, quack, and there's the one for Mickey Mouse, I love cheese, right? So that's that process here. Now, looking at this here, we're going to talk about next part, we're going to talk about is data validation. You've got users going to a form like this, they could type anything, right? They could type a bunch of junk in like that. Are you validating it? So you want to validate it. Now this has got a bunch of junk in the email. I can show you how to validate the email. That's fine. We can do that as well. But we're gonna look at the name validation at first. And so right now, if I look at my stored procedure for a contact, I already put the validation in there. All right, it's basically checking to see if the person's name has only letters or space. You can also validate the email. Email can be validated as well. We'll just show you an example with the name. There's a couple of different places that you can do data validation. Come here. Where is it done? The client browser, smartphone, whatever, really bad idea. Because the client, come back to this chart, remember, this client can be anywhere on the planet. It's complete, it's on the other side, it's on the wild, I like to call www means the wild web. Like not the wild west, but the wild web. Because it's out there anywhere on the planet. Worldwide sense, it really means World Wide Web. But that means this browser client or smartphone could be anywhere on the planet. It could be Russia or China, it could be, that infamous prince from Nigeria who will send you $1 million if you just send him $50,000 first. It could be anywhere. So you don't want to trust the browser to do validation. You could, but it's a really bad idea. You could do validation on the app server, which is okay. But the app server, like the database server, is going to be on the other side of the firewall, your side of the firewall that you control completely. So it's okay to do the validation here. I'll tell you why you should do it on the database server in a moment. Again, the other option is the database server. Best choice, self-defending database. That means the database defends itself. The database shouldn't depend on an external service to defend its data. It should defend its own data. Now the app server, like I said, it's on, it's your server, it's behind the firewall. It's okay to validate it there, but it's probably not the best choice. So let me show you how you can do it both ways. Here is an example of how you would do it on the app server. So you get a contact, and I got a little helper function called isLetters that's going to say, is what I passed in here just a letter, upper or lowercase? And then in the JavaScript here on the server, the app server, I'm calling that and saying, is the contact that I got in from the client only contain letters? If not, it's going to return this status. App server says invalid characters in name. Take a look at the code for a moment on that. That's in the service under contact. It's the same code I'm going to show you, but I'll show you right in here. It's down. There we go. Letters only right there. So I'm checking to see right here. Like I said, app server says invalid characters in name. So let's see what the hell that looks. So if I put in like a bunch of stuff like that and da-da-da like that, that's not a legitimate name, right? It's not a legitimate name. App server says invalid characters in name. Okay? You go to the database, you're going to see that contact has not been added. The ops server sent it back and said, nope, I'm not going to accept it. All right. So I'm going to disable this now. I'm going to disable this for a second. I'm just going to comment it out so that it disables it. Okay, we'll have to restart the server. Go to the stored procedure for a moment. Contact. Now I've also got an if statement here. Name, again, this the same sort of equation. Is it only letters? If not, I'm sending back again a status of -1. The message is database says invalid characters. Now, the reason I'm doing that, let me do this again. We restarted the server already, so this will not go. Now, if I send it, it's going to tell the message we're going to get is the database says that. Prior, the message was app server says invalid characters, right? This time, because I disabled that, now it's up to the database to do the data validation. If I click this, database says invalid characters in name. So now the database stopped it. The database said, no, this is not good. I'm not going to accept it. And if we go here, you've got that. Now, you can also do validation on the email. So look at this here, contact, the email address. Validation on the email address, and the email as well. Very similar validation, but you probably would allow underscores and numbers as well in here. It's a little more complicated, but one of the basic things you could do at least on the emails, you could say P. So right now, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to pass this in, but I'm going to send this in valid now. But I'm going to leave the invalid email. Send it. Email sent. No, it didn't. If we go into the database, contacts, you'll see it added it. Okay, but it's not good. It was an invalid email. So one of the things you could just say here is that if email not like percent, it's got to have an @ sign, right? Percent. And then you can also say dot, at least 1 character percent, right? So if it doesn't match that minimum pattern, I'm going to return it as being invalid. And it's going to basically be the same thing as here, except we're going to, oops, come here, and database says invalid email. Invalid email. Go ahead and save this. The nice thing is also I don't have to restart the app server now because the change was made in the database server. So I don't have to do a restart of the app server, which is another benefit to using stored procedures. So we'll go again. Database says invalid email. Now, if you go here to contacts, you'll see that was not added the second time. It was stopped by the database. Now, you can go into a lot more validation on emails because you also want to check and see, like, you could say this regex as well, right? What if they put or maybe I could say or. Now, you should allow numbers and stuff here as well. Let's say or. Let's just do this here. Oops. Go here. Or P underscore email. Right, and I think what you can also do here, you can also say like 1 to 9 underscore is okay. Put a couple of different extra characters in there, right? There's here. So let's just go back to here. And there's the email. Okay, I can say at. Okay, now that would be valid. Ooh, still doesn't like it. Why don't you like it? Oh, I know why. Okay, I need to add the @ sign and a dot in there as well. Need to have those values as well for it to be valid. See? Yay, sent. Okay, that went. That time went. Now that's okay. And I can also do an underscore or something like that. But let's look at some characters that are not valid, considered valid. I can't put a % sign in there or a comma. I can't go in here and say comma. Database says invalid email because that's not a valid character. So this is an example of the database policing itself, basically, right? It's defending its own data. And that's kind of like the way, that's a best practice, in my opinion. Not everyone agrees because a lot of people don't understand how powerful stored procedures are. So they do it in the app server, which, like I said, is okay. It's just not the best way. All right. Look at the stored procedure. Why, again, back to here. Why database is a stored procedure? Number one, the database should defend itself. The database shouldn't be dependent on anyone else to defend it. Even the app server. Yes, it's behind the firewall. They're both behind the firewall. But what if they somehow managed to bypass, a hacker managed to bypass the app server? Well, the last line of defense is the database server. And if the database server is not defending itself, then your data could get really messed up. So really, the best practice, as far as I'm concerned, is to do this in a stored procedure. The database should defend itself. That's it. There's going to be more on stored procedures coming up because this is a big topic. I just touched on it, but one of the things I really wanted to do is not only talk about stored procedures, but also how it fits in with the entire full stack architecture and why you should use stored procedures, right? That's very important. So thank you, and we'll see you probably next week with the next video with more on stored procedure. Have a good day, have a good weekend, and have a happy Valentine's Day again. Bye.